Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So I have been having lots of breakthroughs recently that pertain to romantic relationships, and I'm really excited to kind of share my new perspectives with you guys and just these new ways of looking at things. So let's dive into the video. So the first thing that I want to touch on is this idea of having a relationship as a goal in life. So I think this is true for lots of people. This was always the case for me. I always thought of a relationship as a marker of success. So I had and have lots of goals, but I always said to myself, if I had an amazing house, if I had an amazing job, if I had all the money in the world, but I didn't have the relationship that I wanted, then I wouldn't feel successful. And I think that is probably true, maybe not to the same extent, but I think that's probably true for lots of people. It really is a goal in life. So what I've since realized is that that way of thinking actually sets you up for, let's call it failure, right? Because the outcome doesn't just depend on you. There's a whole other person involved. You could quote unquote do all the right things, but there are lots of different factors that you can't account for. And so I don't think it's helpful to have that as a goal because, as I said, it doesn't just depend on us. So I thought about it and I was thinking, so what is it that I can do? How can I actually influence this without attaching myself to that goal? And that's when I had this realization that the goal shouldn't be the relationship. The goal should actually be to embody my best self in the relationship. And that starts now. That starts with any interaction that we have with people. And in doing so, that's when we'll actually attract the kind of person that we want, because we are being that kind of person. Ultimately, whatever frequency we carry, whatever we kind of emit, that's what we will get back in return. So if we're focusing on being the best version of ourselves and we're embodying all of these qualities that we love, we will actually start to attract people with those same qualities because we're emitting a certain frequency, and that's what we'll get back in return. That's what will be mirrored to us in the form of the kinds of people that come into our lives. So it really makes sense that we should put our energy into that. So by first becoming that which we want, we will actually attract more of those things into our lives, right? And that may well be in the form of a romantic partner. But even if not, by following this system, you can't fail, right? Because you were only focusing on your own behavior anyway, and investing in bettering yourself and investing time and energy in developing yourself is by far the best investment that you can ever make. And actually, it makes sense that we should focus our energy on ourselves and how we're operating, because that's the only thing that we can ever control. We can't ever control how somebody else behaves, but we can always manage our own behavior. Now, you might be thinking, okay, yeah, that sounds good in theory, focus on myself, I'll get that back in return. But actually, I just want the relationship. This just feels like copping out. This just feels like giving up. And that's actually what led me to my second breakthrough. And this is where I would really encourage you to take a moment to try to understand exactly why you wanted this relationship. What was it that you thought that you would achieve, or what was it that you thought that you would feel by having this relationship? And, this is something that you can do just by journaling or meditating, things like that. This is something I did on myself. And one of the things that came up for me was I realized that I wanted a relationship to feel security. And that made me think, I don't actually need to wait for a relationship in order to feel secure. I can get that from various other things. I can feel secure in my finances. I could feel secure in my other relationships, my friends, my family. I can also find security just within myself. And this is probably the most important, just realizing that I will always be okay. I can always rely on myself. I will always have me. And that in itself provides security. So I don't need to wait for security from somebody else, from an external source. I can actually provide myself with security. Other interesting thing is that trying to find security in another person is probably the most ridiculous thing that I was trying to do, because like that in itself is not secure. You know, you could be in an amazing relationship today and it could end tomorrow. You know, that could be through various things. That could be through loss. It could be through simply growing apart. So like, it doesn't make sense to attach security to something that in itself is not secure. And so I really had to realize that that security has to come from within. Otherwise, it's like inherently not secure. So we really have to find that security from within and not from things that are so subject to change, because then you'll always find yourself in this position of seeking, and you leave yourself just vulnerable. Like, and this brings me to another point where it's like, most of us enter into relationships because we want to feel complete, right? We think that by getting into this relationship, this person will add this to my life, or this person will make me feel this. When I have this, then I will feel that. And what that does is actually, that way of thinking only breeds more insecurity, because even if you have the relationship, what you'll start to think is, well, if this relationship ends, or like, if for some reason, like I no longer have this person, then what will I be? You know, you start to question yourself, and you don't feel secure in yourself without this status or without this person. So if we're saying that by having this thing, by having this relationship, or by having this relationship with this specific person, then I will feel enough, that's quite dangerous, because what you're actually saying is, without this person, without this relationship or this status, I'm not enough, I'm not complete, you know, I'm missing something unless I have this. And that really alludes to an issue of self-worth, because if we first don't feel secure within ourselves, and we're so, let's use the word desperate, if we're so desperate for somebody else to fill this void or to make us feel complete, that puts you in a position where, you know, you're likely to settle for somebody who perhaps isn't the best for you. And that's because you're craving this thing, and you think that simply being with somebody will bring you this feeling, or will bring you something that you don't have without them. It's a reminder to just work on yourself and make sure that you're a complete person, like without this relationship. And so having that confidence and that security within yourself is something that's so empowering. This ability to feel love and to feel complete on our own without somebody else, because it means that you have standards, and it means that you won't settle. And this is also important for anyone who is on a self-love journey. You know, having standards and having boundaries and these kinds of things is really important. It just means that you won't tolerate things that are not right for you. You will have an awareness of your self-worth, and you just won't tolerate anything less than you deserve. And it's interesting, because it's in doing this, it's in having these boundaries and having these standards, that you in turn attract the kind of person that you want. Because once you're embodying this and you're vibrating at that frequency, and you've kind of set that threshold, you just reject anyone that doesn't align with that. You know, you no longer align with anything else. And so all you attract is people who also have these standards, and who also respect themselves and value themselves. And so that's when you start to attract the right kinds of people into your life. And so another realization that I had, and this goes back to thinking of a relationship as a goal, is if we have a relationship as a goal, what we're saying is that this isn't something that's part of our identity, right? If it's a goal, it's something that we don't currently have, right? And it's interesting, because when we think of it in that way and we have it as a goal, it's almost like we're putting it on a pedestal. You know, if we're reaching for something, it means that it's above us, right? That's how we're thinking of it. That's why we're reaching for it. So if we're reaching for this thing, you know, if we have this relationship on a pedestal, if we have a relationship with a specific person on a pedestal, what we're saying is that we're not enough without them. You know, if in having this relationship, I will feel validated, I will feel enough, then what I'm also saying is that currently I'm not enough. Maybe we're overvaluing that specific person, we're putting that person above ourselves. And again, that just alludes to self-worth issues, because if you're overvaluing somebody else, it's because you're not seeing your own value. It means you're devaluing yourself, because we're looking for validation in something else. We're looking for this status or this person to bring us that feeling. And the thing is, even if we get the relationship that we want, if we don't address the feelings of unworthiness, then we're likely to sabotage it anyway. We will definitely sabotage to put ourselves in a position where we get back to that place of being without this thing because we didn't feel worthy of it to begin with, right? And if we don't believe that we're worthy, the way that the mind works and the subconscious works is that it will always act in accordance with our beliefs. So our reality will always show us what we believe. And if we don't feel enough, like, we will just sabotage ourselves to get back to a place where we don't have this thing so that we can then prove to ourselves and say, see, look, I was right. I wasn't enough. I wasn't worthy. And we see this all the time. So not just in relationships, but how many times do we hear stories of people, for instance, winning the lottery and within 5 years or so, they go broke. And the thing is, it's probably because, they didn't align themselves with money to begin with. They didn't feel worthy of that money. And so they found a way to sabotage so that they could get back to a place that they were comfortable, to a place that matched their beliefs and how they felt about money. And so that's why it's so important to make sure that we work on the things going on in our subconscious. So how do we then prevent this self-sabotage? So if we're thinking again in terms of a relationship, how do we prevent this from happening? The way that we do this is we simply normalize it. So, I talked a lot before about relationships being on a pedestal. So the way that we normalize it is we take it off of that pedestal. We make it something that has less significance. It's no longer this thing that's out of reach. It's no longer this thing that's unattainable. It's a very normal thing. This is something that I could have at any time. This is a part of my reality. We just completely normalize it. And so in doing so, we really detach from that feeling of I am lacking something and this relationship will give it to me because we're complete already. So this is no longer, something that we're looking at for validation. This is something that we can have at any time if we choose, providing it's the right circumstances. But this is not something that's going to improve our lives. This is not something that's going to make our lives that much better. Yes, it might be a nice addition. It's like the cherry on top, but it's not required. We can still want to manifest love. There's nothing wrong with that. But the difference is that it then starts to come from a place of oh, this would be I'd love to have this. It comes from a place of desire as opposed to oh, I need this thing. Unless I have this thing or this person in my life, I won't feel this or I won't experience this. And so it takes you from coming from a place of lack and you come instead from a place of desire. And that's a much better way to approach things. It's a much better energy to be in. And so another breakthrough that I had, which connects again to this idea of putting a relationship on a pedestal, is I realized that we often don't look at relationships in the same way that we look at other things in life, right? So I think most of us understand now that when things happen to us in life, there's always a lesson to learn. What if we started thinking of relationships in the same way? So let's say you had an amazing relationship that went really well. Maybe the lesson that you were supposed to learn there was how to love somebody deeply. Maybe the lesson was to learn how to coexist with somebody else. But also, if you had a relationship that didn't work out, then it's also a lesson. Maybe there was something that we needed to address before the next relationship. I think because we often have relationships on this pedestal and we give it so much significance, we often forget to look at it through the same lens. It's just there to teach us a lesson. And so if we normalize relationships and we just take it for what it is and see the lessons that we're supposed to see and learn, what we're meant to learn from it, it can be very freeing because then we don't get so attached. If it doesn't work out, we're not so attached to it because we just realize okay, this situation was meant to teach me a lesson, or I was meant to grow with this person in this way. And now we're both richer for the experience. And that's something that, you can choose to take into the next relationship, or you can choose just to carry forward anyway. So because we're now richer for the experience, even if the relationship ended, we've actually gained something in this process. Like, I think we can often get stuck thinking of relationships as just lost, like, oh, I've now lost this person, or I've missed out on this opportunity, or I've missed out on this feeling I thought this person was going to give to me. But actually, you've learnt lessons through that experience, and thus you've gained something. You know, you now have something that you didn't have before. And I think looking at it in that way is a beautiful way to look at it. It's a very empowering way to look at it. And looking at things in that way can really give us a lot of peace. Because often when relationships end, if we didn't want it to end, then we can spend a lot of time thinking, you know, it should have been this way, this shouldn't have happened, it was meant to be like this. And we can feel really aggrieved at the end of a relationship. But if we, again, remove all of that significance and just look at it as you would any other experience in life, and just take what you were meant to learn from it, there's a reason it didn't work out. You know, if it was meant to be, it would have been. And so you can really step back and look at it through a different lens and say, okay, why did this situation happen? Did I play any kind of part in it? Was there something that I need to work on for the next time, or just work on in general? Was this situation actually good for me? Is this what I thought it was? And we can really detach, and again, that can be so freeing. So if we look at it as this teachable moment, we can step back and say, okay, wow, I see that, you know, I attracted this person, or we attracted each other because we were meant to grow together in this way. We were meant to teach each other these lessons. Or the relationship ended so that I could learn these lessons. And when you realize that, you really realize that everything is working in your favor. Because once you learn those lessons, you can only be better. Like, you're not starting over, you're starting from experience. That's something that no one can ever take away from you. You can carry that forward now into the next relationship, or you just carry that forward in life in general, because now you're richer for that experience. And again, it can be very liberating, because then we realize, okay, this relationship was just a season in my life. Again, it's not something that's so significant. This was just a season. This was just here to teach me a lesson. And so we can kind of free ourselves of like a lot of pain and that feeling of struggling and attachments that aren't healthy for us. Not everything is meant to be a forever thing. And I think we often think that, and we attach that meaning to relationships because, again, we make them so important in our lives. But like, not everything is meant to be forever. Some things are just for a season. Some things are just in order to learn a lesson. And if we look at it like that, honestly, it's the most freeing and liberating thing. And so it takes away any kind of anxious energy around it. It takes away any kind of desperation, which, by the way, people can sense. And so if you remove all of that, like, ultimately it makes the process easier anyway, because you're not walking around like with that kind of energy. People don't sense that from you. Like, it really just comes from desire and like, oh, this would be nice, but also if not, like, I'm good anyway. So that is it. Those are just a few ways that I have changed my view on relationships. I'm sure there'll be a part 2 to this video, but that's kind of my thoughts for now. And let me know in the comments if any of this resonated with you. Let me know if there's anything you think that I've missed. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you've watched the video to this point, you obviously like it, so hit the like button, and I will see you in the next one.